State of the goaltender time for the Buffalo Sabres, and I think it looks really good going into both next season and the future. I feel very solid about the Sabres going forward. In goal, Luukkonen, Devin Levi. Where does James Reimer fit into this mix? All coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are also available, of course, on YouTube where you can watch the show. We are available to you on our text line. If you go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres to sign up, then we can interact there. Summer for news is a little bit slower, of course, now that we've our post-free agency, but if there's a big trade and you're not dialed in on Twitter every single minute of the day, and the Sabres decide to go trade for a top six winger, you can find that out from us on our text line. Again, if you're not a texter already, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres. Excited to talk goaltender today. We talked about the blue line on our last show. If you missed that, you can check that out on our YouTube channel or wherever you get this podcast. You can just scroll back in your feed one episode and find our talk about the blue line. Today, though, we'll get to goaltender. We spend a lot of time on forward, so push that back a little bit later on. The Sabres making one signing in goal this offseason, bringing in James Reimer into the mix. We'll talk about how he affects the goalie mix. Also, how I see the Sabres net going forward beyond this upcoming season. What does the next 3 years look like? What does the next 5 years look like? And I'm feeling very good about where the Sabres are in that standing. But a lot to get to on today's show. News-wise, as I mentioned, not really much going on right now in the world of hockey. This is the off-season time. This is when your Pierre LeBruns, your Elliot Friedmans are off on some island filled with palm trees and whatnot. In terms of what we've seen recently, you get your trade rumors once in a while, nothing, though, involving the Sabres. We did have a good question, though, from a texter. And this relates to RFAs. That's really next. RFAs, arbitration, that's one thing that we'll fill you in on our text line the moment it happens is what does UPL's contract look like? And we'll spend a lot of the first segment on that today. But Peyton Krebs as well, we'll get news on him eventually, and a couple of others, including Beck Malenstein, the newest Buffalo Sabre on the fourth line, is an RFA, and he'll need a contract as well. He filed for arbitration along with Luukkonen. Krebs did not, or was not eligible. One question I got from a texter today: what about the Sabres in offer sheets? And he asked about a couple players specifically, but one of the players that this texter asked about as a possibility for offer sheets, which, don't hold your breath, they never ever happen. General managers in the NHL are terrified to do them. They very rarely do them. But one team has been open to it, and one team has gone back and forth by doing this. If you look back at the Carolina Hurricanes, that's a team in the last 5 years that has signed an offer sheet. Now, they did it in retaliation because the year before, Montreal went after Sebastian Aho, so Carolina in turn went after Kotkaniemi of Montreal, and they got him. They got him to sign in Carolina, and they got him. So, all right, that team seems like they're open to it. I know they didn't throw the first punch, but they threw a punch back. So, can I hit them from the side with, oh, boom, I'm going to take Seth Jarvis from you? Listen, if Kevin Adams is a GM that is got limited job security or is someone that other GMs in the league don't fully respect, which I don't know to be true. It's something that gets said, and you never actually know how true it is. If it is true, then why not? Why not do it? Why not offer sheet a guy? And Seth Jarvis might just be the right idea. I don't think Carolina would let him go. That's another part of offer sheets, right? But if Jarvis were to sign with you and you were to give him a big contract loaded up front to make it harder for Carolina to sign him, what you would do as a chance to get him, and Jarvis, by the way, if you're wondering, like, this is first round pick, 13th overall, only 4 years ago, has played 3 years in the NHL as a 19-year-old in his rookie year. 3 years ago, he had 17 goals, 40 points. As a 20-year-old, second-year guy, kind of regressed, 14 goals, 39 points. But then this last year, the breakout, 33 goals, 34 assists, 67 points. He is a very good two-way player, Seth Jarvis. So he's giving you that offense, and he actually received, how many was it? Was it one? It might have been 1 5th place vote. So maybe don't give him too much credit for that. But Hockey Reference has him as finishing 8th, 8th in the voting for the Selke. Okay, he got 1 1st place vote, 1 3rd place vote, 4 4th place votes, and 2 5th place votes. So, okay, actually a little bit better than I thought. 29 total votes. 1 for 1st, 1 for 3rd, 4 for 3rd, 4 for 4th, excuse me, and 2 for 5th. So we got some Selke votes in. Good player. Very good player. Very deserving of a big contract. You would be forcing Carolina to make a decision between Seth Jarvis and Martin Necas, who is a player who we've spent a lot more time talking about this offseason. You would make them have to choose because they're not going to want to pay both. Cap-wise, it really isn't very possible for them to pay both. So what would you have to give him? I mean, you'd have to give him at least, to me, $9 million per year, if not more. If you want to get him to sign, which is a big part of this too, and get Carolina to not match, you offer Seth Jarvis a contract at $9 million per year. And then Carolina decides, do we want Jarvis for $9 million, or do we pay Necas for less than that, which I would assume, and we'll take, with Necas, the compensation we get for Jarvis, which would be 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and a third-round pick. 2 firsts, a second, and a third. And if you're Carolina, you might think, well, the Sabres are also kind of a tire fire historically, so their first-round picks might be really appetizing to me, because if they fall on their face, that's going to be a great deal for me. Otherwise, it's not a great deal, because Jarvis at that age and at that talent is worth more than 2 first-round picks, if you ask me. Definitely worth more than 2 first-round picks. Love the idea, just don't see it happening because GMs don't like the offer sheet. So let's get into the goaltending today. State of the goalie. We'll talk UPL, we'll talk Devin Levi, we'll talk a little James Reimer as well. But let's start with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen coming off his awesome breakout year that I definitely did not see coming in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I sat in this chair, 10 months ago before the start of last season, as the preseason was going on, as training camp was going on, and I sat here and gave you the take that I wouldn't mind the Sabres waiving UPL and losing him for nothing. I just thought he was nowhere as a commodity, as an asset in the NHL, as once thought of top goalie prospect that since the OHL just had not performed. Since getting double hip surgery, had not looked himself, at least from what we were told he was as a prospect. AHL was a big, part of my opinion on that. Was it's not just the 50 games he had played in Buffalo before this past year, where you did not get good results from Luukkonen. You got a good week, one good week in 2022-23 from Luukkonen. And otherwise, the rest of his NHL career had been pretty bad. But I wasn't even worried about that, because if I had had success at the lower level, I would have been, okay, no, I still want to see this through. Sure, it hasn't started great, but okay, 23 years old, and look at all this other production that I have that eventually can transition to the NHL. But you just didn't have that. He was not good in the AHL. He was not good for Rochester. He was a sub-900 save percentage goalie for the Amerks. So I had a guy that didn't perform in the AHL, didn't perform in the NHL, hadn't performed since the OHL maybe 4 years prior. What was I really supposed to expect? There was no evidence that this guy was on his way to becoming a starting NHL goaltender other than where he was drafted and his size as a 6'5" goalie. But you know what? That came to fruition. He figured it out. He developed well. He used his size better. I thought athletically he looked a lot quicker last year with his side-to-side movement. I thought he was very lumbering in his first year or two that we saw him for the Sabres, at least in a little bit that I got to see him in Rochester, which wasn't much. I know, more statistically based, my opinion on him there. But Luukkonen, I thought, looked the part. And I did talk to a couple of people. In fact, actually, I talked to Bulldog's son, Owen Parker, who, of course, used to play goalie for Nichols and then was a goalie in the NAHL for New Mexico. And I was talking to him about Luukkonen nearing the end of the season once. And he mentioned to me, and he knows more about goaltending technique, of course, than I do. And he mentioned to me that a big difference in Luukkonen is he decided last year to sit further back in his goal, that he wasn't out attacking. You know how Levi kind of comes way out of the net and attacks the shooter with his angle, and sometimes that could not pay off, right? Because then the guy can go around him. Luukkonen was very much the opposite this last year. He sat back in his own goal, said, I'm going to hang around the goal line. I'm not going to go way out and challenge. I've got the size. I don't have to move as far, right? So angle-wise, he figured that out, and I do think that probably contributed a lot, I would think, to his success last season, which was far more than the year before. 2 years ago, when the Sabres missed the playoffs by 1 point, Luukkonen played 33 games, had a 17-11-4 record. Record wasn't bad, but they scored a lot of goals in those games. Luukkonen in those games had an .891 save percentage. Not good. The next year, this last year that just happened, 54 games, 27-22-4 record, a .910 save percentage, a massive upgrade statistically. And again, I thought it just looked, we all thought it looked better. It wasn't hard to see that he looked like a better goaltender in his age 24 season. The advanced numbers would back that up. If you look at Luukkonen year over year, the last 2 seasons, these numbers from Evolving Hockey, these charts from Evolving Hockey, you can check it out, by the way, if you want to check them out at evolvinghockey.com. There's a dash in there, evolving-hockey.com. Luukkonen, this is 2 years ago, 22-23. The chart, if you're not watching it, you can check it out on our YouTube channel. I'll describe it otherwise. You've got expected save percentage at the bottom, expected Fenwick save percentage. You've got the actual save percentage. Then you've got expected goals above replacement per shots faced. So you got a bunch of kind of more advanced goalie numbers all put in here on a chart, and the number on the far left is what's expected of him. Well, okay, 2 years ago, Luukkonen wasn't expected to do all that well, and then he did even worse. Just by a little bit, but was well below average, really below average, and every statistical category that you looked at. But last year, look at how far the numbers jump. He goes above average, even way above average in certain categories, and he was expected to be a save percentage goalie by what the Sabres allowed around the middle. He was expected to save about average, and he was well above average. So statistically, Luukkonen was a very strong goaltender last season by any stretch of the imagination, any way you want to look at it. He was great. So now we get to the contract. And what is that going to look like? That's the tough part of figuring out Luukkonen right now, because we've talked about his contract, but, basically where I'm at with it is I think Luukkonen holds most of the leverage. And I tend to think he's going to get what he wants more than the Sabres are going to get what they want. I don't know what the Sabres want, though. What I think the Sabres should want is 3-year deal. Go short. Go shorter term, and, you give him the money he wants because you're not up against the cap, and the cap continues to go up, and you just bought out Jeff Skinner. So you sign him to a shorter term contract at the money he's looking for, and you give Devin Levi 3 years to take the net over, or not even do that. Just show he's the capable number one, if not star number one goalie that the signs are pointing to. Luukkonen, in the meantime, is your number one goalie going into a must-win season. right? And you need to have a proven commodity, and he is that. Only a 1-year proven commodity. But the other reason I wouldn't go longer term, I wouldn't want this if I'm the Sabres to go 7-8 years, is one, Levi, as I just mentioned. If they see him the way I do as a future star goaltender, then I don't need Luukkonen under contract for 7-8 years. I don't want that much money tied up in goalie for that long if I've got another guy that I'm really high on. The other reason to not go 7-8 years is it was only 1 year. And I tend to think, given the improvement he made, the age that he's at, the draft status, that, okay, now he proved it. And I tend to think that it'll look similar to last year for the foreseeable future. But goalies are weird. Goalies are really weird. Look at any of the top goalies' careers. They all have up and down seasons. And really, it's only the elites that hold up year after year after year after year. Carey Price, I usually use Marc-Andre Fleury as an example, Jonathan Quick as an example, as star-level goaltenders that have had a ton of bad years. Carey Price is like this. Carey Price had a couple of the greatest seasons a goalie's ever had in goal. And if you look at the before and the after, Carey Price had a couple of slightly below average seasons. And, there was his 2017-18 season, 2 years removed from his Hart Trophy campaign. He had a 900 save percentage. Backup caliber. And then what do you do? Next year, bounce right back up to 918. Like, all of these goalies are weird, and you don't know how much variance there's going to be in Luukkonen's career. You don't know if he's going to be great for 1 year and then not great for 2 years and then good again and then bad for 3 years and then good again. Some guys are like that. Some guys have one really good year every 4 years. Other guys are 2 out of every 3. And I just don't know what UPL is on that front. I don't think the Sabres should commit to 8 years, 7 to 8 years until they know the answer to that question or have a better idea of what the answer to that question is. So if I'm the Sabres, I'm offering Luukkonen 3 years, $5.5 million per year. I think that's more money than he probably deserves right now. But you get that because you're willing to take a shorter deal. If you're Luukkonen, I tend to think Luukkonen should be trying to get that 7-year deal because he knows, hey, you got to win right now. You can't afford to lose me. You cannot afford to lose me at all. I don't care. And actually, you're going to give me the 7-year contract right now because I'm not just going to sit around and wait for Devin Levi to take my job away. I want this job. I want this contract. I want to commit to this organization. I don't want to be your placeholder. I don't want to be your bridge goaltender. Give me the 7-year contract or I'm going to make it ugly. If I'm Luukkonen's agent, that's an idea that I'm selling to him. Give me the 7-year deal. I'll only take $4.5 million. I'll take a little less money, but give me the 7 years. That's what I would go for if I'm Luukkonen. I wonder if they meet somewhere in the middle, maybe like a 5-year deal for $5 million. That might be my guess right now. And I think that's more than the Sabres should do. I would not love that contract, but 5 years, $5 million per year, I actually might want to predict that that's what we end up. No arbitration date yet. We'll let you know when that happens. Time out here. When we come back, Sabres signed James Reimer. What? What's the plan there? One-way contract. Him and Devin Levi, how that mix looks, and my thoughts on Devin Levi. We'll get to that as well. Coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast, we are presented here on the show by Indeed. Indeed.com, driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. If you are getting set for training camp, be sure to check out the Locked On Bills podcast with Joe Marino. If you want more of a league-wide view, check out Locked On Sports Today. That's available anywhere you get your podcasts on YouTube or on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's available there as well. Sabres in goal. Devin Levi, I'm very high on. Great season in the AHL. And I would also go as far as to say, I'm not even going to say good anymore. I'll throw the hot take out there. Is it a hot take? I think he had a great year in the NHL. I'm trusting the numbers on that. I'm trusting the data, and I'm also trusting my eyes a little bit too. I think Levi had a very underappreciated season. And it in part was because he got outshined by Luukkonen, and his hockey reference numbers that come right up, like they're not that pretty, but deeper, I think you get a better look at it. So Levi, and then James Reimer, 1-year contract, $800,000, one way. Okay. Little weird when I saw that it was a one-way deal. Also a little weird that you would probably not expect James Reimer, who has not played in the AHL in over a decade, would sign up for a job that likely would start him in Rochester. You wouldn't think that's the case. He's 36 years old, right? Like, who wants to play in the AHL at 36 years old? Often those guys just retire. Maybe he just loves hockey that much. Or maybe he thinks he's getting the backup job. What's likely here? What is the likeliest outcome here? And while it is a little weird to me that it's a one-way contract and that a goalie of that age, of that career, I mean, he's been in the NHL for 14 years, would be open to playing in the AHL, even though that's a little weird, I can't believe that they have him penciled in as their backup goaltender. It's got to be Levi. And I won't believe that it's not Levi. I think until I see otherwise, I believe Devin Levi is their number 2 goaltender. Reimer might be insurance. Maybe they have a deal with Reimer worked out that, hey, we're going to get to training camp. You're going to participate with us. You'll play a couple preseason games. We're going to play the hell out of Levi in the preseason. We're going to get a look at him at training camp, and we're going to make the determination of whether he's ready or not. And if he's not ready, then he goes to Rochester. You're our number 2 goalie. If he doesn't look ready, or if he does look ready, then you can make a decision. We'll let you decide. We gave you a contract, but if you want to retire, that's fine with us. If you want to go to Rochester, that's fine with us too. Or maybe, again, he would just be open to playing in Rochester. I don't really know. But I can't believe he's ahead of Levi in the pecking order. It would make no sense to me because Devin Levi, very clearly, the next stage in his development is the National Hockey League. No doubt about it. He has dominated this is the opposite. It's why I'm so high on Levi now, and it's why I was so low on Luukkonen last year. Was Luukkonen and the steps along the way to the NHL was underperforming. Levi is not only overperforming, he is historically performing. He is the best at his age in the world every step of the way. College, well, before college, World Juniors, dominant, won the Canadian starting job as a 7th round pick, and then performed amazingly. Great at the World Juniors, dominated there, then went to college and had arguably the greatest college career that a goaltender's ever had. Did that at Northeastern. Then he left Northeastern, 7 games with the Sabres that looked really good, almost willed them to the playoffs. Last year, AHL, number 2 in the entire American Hockey League in save percentage during the regular season. Then he gets to the playoffs, and he's throwing up 52 save performances against the Toronto Marlies and 48 save performances. Like, he's standing on his head to try to will Rochester into the next round. He was unbelievable in the AHL. If you look at last year, the combined production between the NHL and AHL of 21-year-old goaltenders or younger, Devin Levi's age or younger, but really mostly his age group. Nobody that's his age had a better season than he did. Yet not Askarov, the top prospect from Nashville, didn't have as good of a season statistically in the NHL or the AHL as Devin Levi did. Levi was the best 22-year-old goalie in the world last year. And if you look at his NHL numbers, okay, go to Hockey Reference, .899 save percentage. All right, not great. All right, a 47% quality start percentage if you want that. Goal saved above replacement. They have him there at -2.6. Okay, but let me head over to hockey, evolving hockey. What do I got there? What do I got on some of these advanced numbers? What do I got on goal saved above expected? Because on those numbers, Levi's fantastic. Levi is a tremendous goaltender. And last year, the big difference between he and Luukkonen was the expected goals scored against him. Luukkonen was about average. If you look at the Sabres' defensive performance in front of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, by the numbers, it was about an average defensive performance. They didn't allow the most chances against in the league when UPL was in net. They didn't allow the fewest. They were right in the middle. When Levi was in goal, I don't know why. This could be completely coincidental. I don't know. When Devin Levi was in goal, the Sabres were horrific defensively. They allowed tons and tons of quality chances, and the numbers bear that out. His expected save percentage was so low, but yet his actual save percentage at even strength, I should point this out, this is all even strength, was fantastic. The reason I point that out is because when the Sabres were shorthanded, Levi actually underperformed. That's an area where I don't know why that happened, but he's got to get better at that. Maybe he's too aggressive when other teams are on the power play. That part, he was not good. But even strength, he was amazing. Fantastic. So I am all in on thinking that Devin Levi is going to be a number one goalie in the NHL. Because guess what? This is the development track of star number one goalies in the NHL. What do star number one goalies do before they get to the NHL? Do they dominate the World Juniors? Do they dominate in college? Do they dominate in the AHL? Yeah, because that's Levi to me. So I see no signs that Levi is not still on his way to being this team's true number one goaltender someday. So that's why I like the idea of Luukkonen only for 3 years. Is I just don't know how you avoid Levi taking over. I just think he's going to be too good. I think he's on his way. All the signs are pointing to right now. He's going to be one of the best goalies in the NHL. He's got to do it. He's got to play a lot more games in the NHL before, we could be 100% confident that that's actually going to happen. But right now, I feel very hopeful that he's on his way to being a star level NHL goaltender. Goal saved above replacement, by the way. I don't know why Evolving Hockey doesn't have it per 60 minutes, because that's a stat that you really would think is very reliant on the amount of chances you're seeing, on the amount of time that you see. So I'll use Money Puck for this, even though I know Money Puck is a little bit flawed with their numbers in comparison to some other premium sites. But if you go to Money Puck and you look at their goals saved above expected numbers, minimum games played, let's go with 10. So every goalie in the league that played 10 or more games last year, goals saved above expected per 60. That's the real number I like. So that's my favorite number to evaluate goaltenders. Goals saved above expected per 60 minutes. And if you, again, anyone that played more than 10 games, how many goalies was that last year? There was 73 goaltenders. Out of the 73 goalies that played 10 games or more, goals saved above expected per 60, Devin Levi ranks 7th. 7th. Basically the exact same number as Connor Hellebuck. And I'm not telling you, by the way, Luukkonen was bad. Luukkonen was in that number 24th out of 73. Luukkonen was very good. But Levi, because it was all because of how the quality of chances he saw against him. So I got Levi as being this team's number one goaltender in 3, 4, 5 years. And until then, I think the dream is you have him and Luukkonen split. And that doesn't really factor James Reimer in anywhere, which is why, I think he's your emergency. I think he's your third goaltender, and hopefully that's it. This year, I think should all be about Luukkonen's your number one, and you play him 50 games, and Levi's your number two, and he plays 32, which is still a very good number. I think more than enough for him to continue to develop. I don't think that's benching him for months at a time and, having to wonder, well, should they send him to Rochester because he's not getting enough minutes to develop? 32 games is enough for that. Jeremy Swayman played around that number for a couple of years in Boston. Swayman, in his second year in the NHL, after playing 10 games in his first year, his second year, 39 starts, the year after 33 starts. And then this last year, he finally went up to 43. That's about the Jeremy Swayman workload for his first couple of seasons that I would want to give to Devin Levi. And look, that's the comparable, right? You go Swayman to Allmark, or you go Allmark for a couple of years, splitting with Swayman. Ullmark's the number one. And then, oh, look, Ullmark's got 1 year left in his contract. Swayman's done more than enough to take over the job. So let's trade Ullmark away. That would be Luukkonen. You sign Luukkonen to the same contract Ullmark signed if you want. 3 or a 4 year deal. And if Levi looks as good as Swayman has in the first 2-3 years of the Luukkonen contract, then what do? You say, all right, Devin Levi time. And you trade Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to, what did Linus Ullmark get from Ottawa? A first-round pick? Beautiful. That is the dream scenario for me. Because I just don't see it being realistic that they'll keep both guys long-term on giant contracts. I think eventually you got to make a decision. For the meantime, you enjoy the ride of having 2 quality goaltenders. If Luukkonen continues to hold up as good as he was last year, and if Levi continues to progress into the NHL, you are looking at one of the potentially is got to be said here. It's a huge part of these two because they're so young and there is still so little. It's not multiple seasons worth of sample size here. I got 1 season of sample size for Luukkonen playing at this level, and I've got 20 games of Levi doing it. It's potential, but the potential is top 10. They have the potential of being a top 10 goalie tandem in the National Hockey League, but they got to really hit for that to really be said about them. Let me know your opinion. What should the future outlook really be thought of for these goaltenders, Devin Levi and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen? That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We'll talk more about the forwards coming up on the show. We'll talk about potential moves that could be left out there as well that we haven't talked about yet. Maybe we'll get wild with some of these ideas, like Mitch Marner and Leon Draisaitl. You know what? It's July. Let's do it. Let's have some fun. We'll talk. We'll go crazy trade ideas coming up with the Mitch Marner and Leon Draisaitl names being speculated about, even though there probably isn't a lot of basis to it. But hey, one can dream, right? We'll talk about some big names coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast. At Sneaky Joe Sports, if you want to follow, check me out on Twitter or ask a question there. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres to sign up for a text line, which is definitely the best way to do that. Thanks for listening today to Locked On Sabres podcast. Making us your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.